Of course, the idea was that we're always thinking, and those thoughts that we're thinking, that they're actually prayers. And we've discussed this particular idea before, and how it's kind of a disturbing idea sometimes. If we consider the quality of our thoughts, we may think that we may decide that those really aren't very good prayers. But we were brought up with the idea that prayer was this directed thought towards God. So we make a decision, we're going to talk to God, and so we like tune the channel to the God channel, and we send these particular group of thoughts to God as prayer, and or we may speak the thoughts. Some of us do it aloud, but it's interesting that we actually, I don't think we believe that just the thoughts that we direct towards God actually get to God. I mean, how we really don't have a transmitter. I mean, we've got these thoughts, and so the thoughts that we decide to direct to God, we're thinking about them as being maybe more holy thoughts. But generally speaking, most of our prayers are prayers of before we train ourselves. Most of our prayers are prayers of requests. They are a wish list to forgive me the Santa Claus in the sky. So this is what we're going to do for December. We're going to, we're going to change up the focus a little bit, and instead of we're going to change the affirmation, and we're going to say that instead of seeing the Christ in the other person, we're going to see the Santa Claus in the other person. So instead of seeing good, we're going to see Santa Claus. This is really not effective, and it's not helpful, but this is the tendency that we get into, is to think of God as being this big guy in the sky who, when we ask for stuff, sometimes gives it to us and sometimes doesn't. And so we're left with these questions. I mean, when we think of God in this way, as being like this benefactor that bestows blessings sometimes and sometimes not, it gets confusing to me to think about it that way, because then I'm trying to figure out, okay, so why didn't I get the goods this time? Is it because of something I said? Is it because of something I did? Am I being punished? And I look out at the world and I see all the people who are suffering, and I say, well, they're probably praying too. I mean, everybody's praying. And if we think about that, our thoughts are prayers, for sure everybody's praying, right? So is God mad at them? Well, this is why, we have, I'm sure that this is why we have big storms. I mean, yeah, because God gets mad at the people who live in that town, and he sends it. No, that's not what happens. Okay. Well, somebody on the radio, I heard it again every time there's a disaster. I was going to say another word, but some confused individual gets on the radio and says, well, God's punishing those people. That's why this happened. Well, I just don't buy it. I just don't think that that's how God's operating, right? I actually don't think that God's operating in the world at all in that way. But the other thing that I believe is that there is an opportunity for good in everything that happens. So God's will is present in that opportunity for good, and we decide which way we're going to go with it. And even when we make a mistake, well, then we've got another opportunity. And the opportunities never cease. So you're never going to run out of chances. So God's not punishing, and God's not actually, and we've talked about this before, and I don't want to offend anybody, but for those of us who live through a life of addiction and have heard, maybe been convinced, that you heard somebody else say it and you start to think it's true, that God saved you when He allowed your buddy to die of an overdose sitting next to you, that is not the case. The only thing that happened is your buddy took more than you did, or more. The only reason you didn't die was because you didn't take quite enough. Now, there's some other things that go along with that have to do with perhaps will to live, could enter into it, but it's not God deciding that your friend died and you didn't. So that, I mean, and here's the other thing that goes along with that. That God has saved you so that you could then help other people. This is not the case either. God's intention is that you help other people because that's what you're designed to do. That's goodwill. And that's what's built into us. God is not saving one person and allowing another to die to teach a lesson or to give. And so when you hear people say, when you ask them how things are going, and now not everybody does this, but many times you'll hear it, they'll say, I am blessed. The connotation that goes along with this is I'm blessed and you're not, because I'm part of this exclusive club. I'm part of the God club. I've been saved. And I'd be happy to tell you the good news about it so that you can be saved too and join into the club. This is not how God operates. Contrary to some recent political opinion, we really are all in this together. We are all in it together. God holds us all in equal esteem. We are all His perfect children. So why did somebody die and the other person didn't die? Cause and effect. This much heroin equals death. Now sometimes you're right on the edge of it, right? You're right on the edge. You haven't taken quite enough, but you could go either way. You could die or you could not die, right? Well, that has to do with other physical attributes. Now, this does not mean that if you have an experience where you almost die from whatever, that you can't take that moment to make a decision, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to turn my life around. I'm going to work for goodwill. That's terrific. That's what we want to do. But let's not be confused about it. Man, it's just too much guilt for me to hold on to, that every other person that I used to shoot dope with is dead and I'm alive, and I'm chosen to do, and their sacrifice was somehow for the betterment of me. This is no good. And the other, just think about the condition of the world. This is why gratitude for what we have as opposed to what other people don't have is really not helpful, because it generates guilt too. If I go around just holding on to gratitude for the things that I have, what I'm doing is I'm comparing it to the things that other people don't have. I want my gratitude to be gratitude for life. Just gratitude for life, gratitude for living. And to understand that the things I have that other people don't have, that's just temporary. It's just a temporary condition. It will pass eventually. So prayer, where does prayer fit into this? Prayer fits into it is that prayer is a discipline of the mind. Prayer is talking to God. So we can, prayers of requests for stuff, prayers for outcomes are not the most effective way to pray. Most effective way to pray is to have some affirmative thing to give, or the highest level of prayer is just the extension of love. And this then isn't even a thought that's in words, but rather just a feeling and an extension of love. So but because we are thinking all the time, we need to understand that those thoughts have an impact on our life. So I told the story at 9 o'clock. I usually don't repeat stories, but years ago when I first started going to Unity on North Main Street, there was a woman, a guest speaker who came there, and she asked the people in the audience, she said, do you have recurring problems in your life? Are there things going on in your life right now that's a problem now, and it's been a problem and it keeps being a problem? And a number of people were brave enough to raise their hands, and everybody there is thinking, oh yeah, I know what she's talking about. she looked out at the people who had raised their hand and she said, well, let me ask you something. What are you thinking? And it was just like quiet in the room. And she was pointing out, and it was actually, this was almost 30 years ago. And it was the first time that I had ever had somebody directly say to me that the quality of your thoughts impacts the quality of your life directly. And that if we are experiencing problems that are the same kind of problems over and over again, that it has something to do with our thinking. It doesn't have anything to do with God being mad at us. It has to do with cause and effect. We think in a certain way, we react in a certain way, and we get things in a certain way. And so when we see patterns in our lives, and once we start to do an examination of ourselves, we can say, well, what can I do to change this? Well, I can start thinking differently. And if we remember the hierarchy of things, we have a belief system, we think, we have a thought, we have a feeling, and then we either act or don't act. So it goes in that order. So I have a belief system that I am lacking. I have a belief system that is ingrained in me by the society, and I'm sure that there's probably a couple other people in the room that have the same belief system because you live in the same culture that I do. I have a belief system that is built in me that there is a lack, that I don't have enough. I don't have enough stuff. And by the way, this is proven because there's always new stuff. And I don't have that, so I must not have enough stuff. And the guy on TV in that ad is telling me that I don't have enough stuff. Well, I've seen this since I was a kid. I mean, we got our first television in 1955. You laugh. I was 3 years old, 1955, and they had commercials then. And that's when that started, and I think it even started before that. So we remember that, and living in a consumer society, the whole society is actually saying the way to happiness is to get more stuff. And it's said in it is said in a subliminal way, but it also is said directly. So this belief system in me says I don't have enough, and so my thoughts, many times my thoughts revolve around getting more or protecting what I have, which leads to feelings that leads to aggressive feelings, leads to fearful feelings, which in turn then has my actions in the world appear to be selfish. Because I don't have enough stuff. I need to get more. So the belief system is centered in me, but prayer is an antidote to the belief system. Because what I'm going to start doing, because the belief system is actually just a set of thoughts. So in my prayers, what I want to do is I want to substitute thoughts of lack for thoughts of abundance, for thoughts of plenty. And it seems silly. It seems like this can't possibly work. But if we write down a list of affirmative thoughts, and every time a thought of lack occurs to us, we insert the affirmative thought and hey, fold the list up, carry it in your pocket. I have 12 affirmations that I tell myself every morning. And each affirmation is designed after a step in the 12-step program. I tell myself that every morning. Those affirmations are now installed in my mind. So when I get a thought that is contrary, that I really don't want to have, that leads to suffering, and by the way, just think about this. I have a negative thought, it leads to suffering. That means that negative prayer results in negative experience. So my negative thought is just a negative prayer that results in an experience that I would really rather not have. So I have these list of things that I tell myself that I substitute for the thought that was causing me suffering, and I stop suffering. Well, it's not easy. It's discipline. It takes time, but it will, and as soon as it starts to work, as soon as we do it and then we get a result, we could say, man, God blessed me because God took that suffering away. Well, God didn't actually take the suffering away. God gave us the ability to choose between the suffering and the not suffering, and we chose the not suffering. So I have a belief system, in me that I am, as a person, inadequate. And this belief system is also cultural. And we all have it to one degree or another. And you can argue about it. You can say consciously that you don't think that way. But it is a cultural belief. And one of the places that it comes from is that there are churches all over this country that are preaching this morning that we're all miserable sinners and that none of us deserve the grace of God because we are inherently broken. Now, many people here, you may not have ever attended a church that told you that, but the messages are still there. And people are trying to tell you that even if you are not going to their church. And so this gets installed in the subconscious that there's something wrong with us. There's something and actually it says there's something in us that we can't do anything about that's wrong with us. Now, I will agree in one area. In our ego, in personality, we really can't do anything about it. But with the help of Spirit, we can. Anything that's broken in us can be healed through the access of Spirit. But so my belief system is that there's something wrong with me. And so my thoughts concerning that is anytime something goes wrong, I've only got two choices. Well, I got actually three. I could say God's punishing me. Or I could say, I screwed up or you screwed up. And actually those two things flip-flop back and forth. Well, when I think that I screwed up, then I look for a reason why it wasn't really my fault, it was somebody else's fault. And then I try to project my mistake onto someone else. If they wouldn't have done this, then I wouldn't have done this particular thing. And we kind of, I share my shame with you. And so, but this continues the cycle over and over again. So what I need to do is to say when something goes wrong, accept it. Accept the fact that something went wrong. And the reason it went wrong was not because, yes, it might be because I made a mistake, but it really was because of cause and effect. So I did this incorrectly. This is the result. And so, wait a minute. Let me just consider that for a moment. Well, then the next time, maybe I would do a different thing. Maybe I'll do something other than that thing that caused the problem. So in other words, we try to, through discipline of mind, we try to get to the place where we stop making the same mistakes over and over again, expecting different results. We decide we're going to do something different. And then with this help from Spirit, we get the ability to do something different. So prayer, then, for ourselves should be affirmative prayer. It should be prayer like saying, look, when I'm afraid, I should say to myself, and I do say to myself, the Father and I are one. If God be with me, what should I fear? I mean, this is the idea. If I am one with God, what do I have to be worried about? Everything's cool. It's just a thought that goes, and it triggers other thoughts in my mind. It triggers some argumentative thoughts. I say, well, that's, there's part of me that says that's not true. You are far from one with God. Look at your situation. These things, but you just keep going back and changing the thought over and over again. So, if I find myself in a position where I believe that I need help, I learn to ask for help. And the help is just say, look, by myself, I can do nothing. This is what Jesus said. Of myself, I do nothing. It's Father within that does the work. So I want to open myself to that divine power through prayer is to say, yes, okay, so now I'm feeling hopeless. I'm feeling helpless. I'm going to allow this power of God in me to help me take care of the situation. And it's very interesting, as in the meditation that we did, it's not just a meditation for area service. It's a meditation to be open and receptive to everyone who comes in front of us so that they can help us. Because they do. Every single person has a gift for us. And this is another thought that has to change. Because I have the thought that just about every person that comes in front, this is the thought that comes to my mind, especially if I'm preoccupied with something else. the first thought that comes to my mind is, the person is an annoyance. The person is an interruption. The person is distracting me from my self-centered pursuits. I have to change that thinking. I have to start seeing that the person standing in front of me, they brought me a gift and I have a gift for them. Especially, this kind of stuff works out when we're single-minded. There's a good thing about being single-minded and have focus on the task at hand, because we're focused and we want to get our thing done. But when somebody comes to interrupt us, we can't just be seeing them as an annoyance. We need to see them that something's... Now, we may need to send them on their way, because we don't have help. We don't have help for them in this particular time or moment. But we need to be open and receptive to that person when they do show up. Sometimes you have to say, and this really does work. When someone comes and you've exhausted the possibilities of helpfulness, you say, "Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I really got to get back to work." Nobody can argue with that, especially at work. They can't say, "Oh, no, you don't have to go back to work. We can talk here for another 20 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to get back to this." Just a thought. So, human suffering is a result of believing something to be real that isn't. This is a thought system. The belief that something is real that isn't. Now, what we're talking about here is we're really talking about ultimate reality. If my body has a disease and it is causing me discomfort, in my body, it is real. But in the reality of spirit, it is not. And so what I want to focus on is I want to focus on that. I want to focus on the higher reality. And immediately,